Okay, hello and welcome back to the Understand the World podcast. Today I'm in fact recording a podcast that I have already deleted 3 times because I wasn't content with how I spoke, how I talked, and how I, flung everything together. So today I'm talking about this topic for the 4th time. I'm recording this podcast for the 4th time. And it's about, first of all, before we get into this, we have an intro. Finally, I managed to design and to edit together an intro for this show. There you go. And for the second thing, of course, you can see right here, I have a new microphone. Finally got myself into the hand of ridding myself of disposing my USB microphone because this broke last week, and I got myself a proper one with an audio mixing table with all the necessary gear that all the fancy people use. So I hope, if I have the right gear now, maybe the numbers will go up and finally I won't get audio issues anymore of any crackling or popping, whatever it is. So before we get into this, I want to kind of talk about the future of the podcast. I have decided that I want to stop having on guests on the show simply because I'm fed up with sending emails that don't get a response or calling people that don't get a response or getting rejected about it. This is just, if it's not meant to be, I said to myself after sending out over 100 emails, then it's probably not meant to be. So I'll make this a solo show, and this is mostly also about trying to constantly develop my idea of learning how to speak properly, freely, exactly how it should be for myself. And if you want to come along with this journey, if you want to tag along and want to be part of it and want to know exactly maybe a little bit more what I think about certain topics, then you're more than welcome to do so. And that's why the only thing I'm asking of you, the viewer, the listener, however you consume this podcast, not to give me any kind of feedback on donations, subscriptions, followers. I mean, this is all things that I really appreciate, but I think the only thing that I really appreciate at the moment that means the most to me is if you share these episodes with a friend. So I can reach more people, we can increase the audience, we can increase the reach of this podcast, and then move on from there with subscriptions and followers and all this nonsense. But for now, it would mean the world to me if you could share this episode with a friend that you think might need and might want to hear it. And so for today's topic, I've picked a topic that I've been asked about 2 times already on Instagram to talk about it. And I'll do this off the top of my head because I think it's a topic that has affected all of us at some point somehow. No, it's not some recent news coverage footage or some social issue, but it's about the topic of self-help. And I have come in contact with self-help for the first time when I was in high school, studying for my final exams in, I think, 11th grade. And I did this when I was in math class. For the first time, I watched motivational videos because I really sucked at maths. So at some point, somehow I had to validate my study time. And so I did it in this way that I consumed motivational videos by pumping me up all the time. And then for some reason, miraculously, when I did it for the first time, succeeding in getting a B- in an exam, math exam, where before I would get D's and E's in these exams. So it was quite strange to see what an impact these videos had for the first time. And so I thought to myself, well, if they're so hyping me up so much, then they must be good, they must be helpful. And I was wrong, because for the next exam I did the same thing and I got a D-. And so I was like, well, what? I watched the videos again. What's going on here? I mean, shouldn't there be some supernatural power that's coming down on me now that's telling me that this is going well and that I should succeed? But no, it was actually something I had encountered, something which would have accompanied me for the next 6 years, which is called action faking. And action faking is a term that's worse than procrastinating. And of course, I talked to you about this before. I invited James Janey to come on the podcast about his documentary, The Toxic Side of the Self-Help Culture. But unfortunately, he hasn't replied. In fact, none of the people who I've invited have actually replied properly or even accepted or even given me and sent me a no. I don't know, maybe I'm just landing in the spam folders all the time, but that just doesn't concern me now. I'm going to stop just inviting them. So, the most important part with this is that it leads to something called action faking. And action faking is worse than procrastinating insofar as that you execute something that you think is going to be beneficial in light of the main task that you have to achieve. For example, if I watch a motivational video about working hard, reaching your goals, studying hard, and then thinking to myself, as a result of that, I've watched this now, and therefore I have all this knowledge now, I have more knowledge now, I've understood the topics, and I'm ready for this exam, while not actually having sat down and done the work and actually worked on it. And this action faking has accompanied me for a lot of times. For example, it was the same with the final oral exams in 2018, the 2 oral exams that I took in 2018, and they were a result also, they turned out really good. I got an A on both of them, but most of them also involved monthly long preparation. And I would also tell people, I would also tell myself, I prepare for this exam that takes place in April. I'll start preparing for this in January. But what that means is that I wouldn't just start making notes and studying for it properly, but listening to some documentary about roughly shaping around the topic that I was trying to talk about while playing a video game or while taking a walk. So it's more of a, let's say, what do you call it? Pretend preparation than a proper preparation. And so this action faking pattern has been in my life for the best amount of my teenage years and my young adult years, and it's still there. And this is also why I want to talk about what I want to talk about with regards to self-help. Is that self-help, while it might appear like a knight in shining armor, I think there's something hidden behind it that needs to be addressed more, and that I want to address in my idea, in my opinion, of the self-help culture, because behind it is a lot of fake, there's a lot of lies, and there's a lot of self-deceptions. And let's take it like this. For example, why do we follow these self-help people? We do this for a specific reason, because we are impressed by them and we think that they have solutions for problems that we have. And these people know that. These people know that they are. We seek solutions. We seek solutions in a way for our relationships. We seek solutions for our problems, heartbreaks, hard exams, depression, whatever this might be. These people and channel creators on YouTube of motivational videos, all the people who count themselves in the area of the self-help genre, they know of our need, of our urge to want to fix our problems by consuming their content. And so what they used to do is disintegrate and also, what do you call it? Deconstruct. Destroy. Let's say destroy. They destroy the language. And they do it in such a way that they use buzzwords, they use certain keywords all the time on key phrases that create this sense of urgency and that ring the bell in your head of not wanting to miss out on anything. And this probably goes, in some ways it goes like this. For example, somebody gives you, you've seen them all, the Instagram ads with the people who are advertising their book in front of their car. Tai Lopez did it first, and then some other, hundreds of idiots did it after him, of saying, you know what I like more than this car, doesn't matter, everything. I've just attained so much knowledge and wisdom, and I want to sell you my free online course and everything. They want to get you hooked to the idea of their program being able to fix your life. And one of these key phrases in terms of that, of course, then is create a better life for yourself, unlock your purpose. Another thing is grow to become a better version of yourself. And then there's some other buzzwords that are being used with that, of course. One of them, the primary one, is facts, truths, and what do you call it? Some others, you need this, another key phrase. The problem with facts and truth is that there's only a very few things in life, that in our lives, in our world, in our ecosystem, we can actually consider a fact. The sun rises every morning, that's a fact. We should... Then that, of course, gets contrasted with opinions. For example, all these political movements currently going on, that is what the political messages they're spreading, the demands that they're making to the politicians, is not a fact. Somebody says President Trump sucks, then people just say, yeah, facts, true. No, it's not a fact, it's an opinion. But the self-help culture then, of course, utilizes this idea of wanting to make an opinion a fact because it enhances the credibility of what they're saying. A fact is, like we said, undeniably true, and it can be discussed from back and forth, left and right. You can discuss it as much as you want, but it will still be factually true. And this then, of course, leads to my first advice, or first impression with the self-help culture, is that there's a lot of language lies going on. And that's what I would like to focus on now, because when you get confronted with these phrases and sentences of buzzwords of things that you hear in every single video and every single thumbnail. You need this advice for you. 98% of the people don't do this, just to name a few examples. It creates the sense of urgency, and you don't want to miss out on this one advice that 98% of people don't do. You want to belong to the 2% of the people who actually do it, who actually want to make a change, who actually manage to make a change, because you want to be special. And that's all fine and well and everything, but in the end it sells a lie, because when you watch these videos that have these provocative thumbnails, they never really say how many percent of people don't do this, and never say what exactly that is they don't do. It is just a lie. It's deception, and it's mostly, it's a marketing scheme. It's also, and that's not only a scheme, it's a marketing scam. To give you this video, we give you this video, watch this video, and you'll see what 98% of the people are not doing, while they all talk about the same issues, talk about the same ideas of working hard, dreaming big, waking up early, create a vision for yourself, believing in your dreams. But there's no statistics that back this up. There's no proper studies that back this up. There's no sources, none whatsoever. So a video in the end, if you think about it for a few more minutes, becomes completely incredibly uncredulous and just untruthful, wrong. It is a pit of lies, and that's why I've become so critical of self-help lately, and at least in the last months, especially since I've spent sadly a lot more time on my phone with the quarantine going on. I've seen it a lot on Instagram, I've seen it a lot on YouTube, that it has enhanced more and more and more, that people just want to try and sell you their online courses, they want to try and sell you their guides, not to be able to help you, but to be able to make money. And the self-help culture has for a long time, probably since its emergence, become what might you call it? Maybe a disguised pickpocket. A pickpocket disguised as a saint, and wants to take your money, but actually tries to disguise itself as someone who's trying to help you. And in the least amount of senses, every self-help narrative and every self-help visualization and also every self-help program is designed in the same way. It is designed from an influencer, a person of influence who's trying to sell you a program that to become as successful as they do. And once you don't get successful, this is also how many people, this is how these influencers then and the self-help authors and people who are trying to sell these programs get out of these fake gurus that they're nowadays called. I get out of being scammed, because there's always a variable that is non-attachable to something. For example, you have to work hard. So if they will always leave them with the apology, or always leave them with the opportunity to say, if someone says, hey, your method didn't work, they can always respond to that. The gurus can always respond to that. Hey, you just didn't work hard enough. You should just work harder. And that leads people to an entirely different route of fake impressions, because they will always think themselves, I'm not working hard enough, and if I just work a little bit harder, if I just disregard my family a little bit more and just put more time into work, if I disregard my job a bit more and put more time into work, if I disregard my health a bit more, my mental health a bit more, and put more time into working, this program is going to finally yield rewards. And this is an entirely different road that we can go down to now, how detrimental and how toxic this program can get, and how toxic this road can get if it is someone who's consulting it who is maybe has a mental illness, who's mentally ill, who has probably depression, and has some sort of mental predispositions that drive them to be depressed. And that's entirely different, and it's much, much worse than if you just think about it. If someone normal, if it's maybe who's mentally somewhat stable consumes the program, is because at some point they will just say, fuck that. But unfortunately, the most people who seek help online, well, I wouldn't say they're not mentally stable, but they're seeking help, so they're in a desperate position. And then if you're in a desperate position, like in any crisis, you're inclined to believe more the things that you may be suspicious about when you're not in a desperate position. So in a way, self-help, if they're trying to sell you something that's more than just a book, is almost a scam. It mostly is a scam, and it's absolutely something you should definitely stay away from. Instead, how you could implement self-help, in my opinion, how I implemented self-help, in my opinion, on a critical level, on a good level, is to always consider every single advice given in the self-help literature under the lens of criticism, thinking about whether or not these people are saying is actually valid, whether they're backing it up properly with arguments that are not oriented towards your emotions, your pathos, but towards the logos, the actual text. So do they back up their arguments with proper studies, and studies that are different than just the Stanford prisoner experiment, the gorilla experiment, and the Milgram experiment, but studies that actually fit to their claims. do they back this up properly? Then it might be considerable for me trying it out. Second question then, of course, becomes in light of that, is it actually worth it for me to try it out? I don't, for example, I don't want to become a pro athlete, so I might take less advice from Lewis Howes than from Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson is an academic. I'm an academic, and therefore his advice is to me much more attractive. You always have to consider that many of these authors have different backgrounds. Jocko Willink is from the military. Lewis Howes is it was a former All-American athlete. Jordan Peterson is a professor. And so every advice is not applicable to everyone. It's mostly also universal wisecracking, because these people are still repeating ideas that have been in the world for a long time. Nonetheless, though, if these people are repeating these ideas, it's still worth considering whether they fit to me or they don't. And it turns out that the ideas of Lewis Howes, the ideas of Michael Manson, and also Mark Manson, I think, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, it's too bland. It's not refined enough for me to consider it helpful. So that's why I turn to people like Jordan Peterson. That's why I turn to other people who have a more refined way of looking at the world. And that's why I benefit from these authors more, and I would advise you, in my opinion, it is important to also consider whether or not you want to benefit from the advice of people who have an entirely different background than you. Yeah, you might benefit from it in certain ways, but in other ways, it's also crucial to consider whether or not their advice comes from a place that is applicable for you to be beneficial or not, right? And in the end, if it's beneficial, then the third big point, if I wanted to implement self-help literature or self-help advice, is to think about whether or not this is actually advice that is long-lasting, whether after I've implemented it for maybe 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 weeks, thinking about whether it's actually proper. And the fourth one, the final one, and I think in this case the most important one, is don't trust hyperboles, don't trust derivation of language, don't trust cliche sentences and buzzwords, because they don't appeal to something that is trying to help you. They appeal to your sense of buying it, because you shouldn't miss out on anything. Let me tell you something, you're not missing out on anything. I'm not missing out on anything if I hadn't read 50 self-help books for my studies. I've made this a point of my study to research and to look into this rhetoric of, for example, why exactly they're so convincing, these books, and why some books are selling better than others. And it's mostly that they're creating the most successful books, create the most sense of urgency, and they trigger the fear of missing out, FOMO, the most in every single bestseller. And then, of course, with that, comes marketing. Numbers go into marketing, Instagram marketing, Facebook marketing, clips, TV show appearances, podcast appearances. But if you subtract all of this and take all of this back, what lies in this ground is how this marketing is structured with regards to our fear of missing out. For example, and then the second part is then why, the final one, actually the fifth one then, is I would advise you to look at the author. Who is the author? Is the author someone credible? Because in the end, a self-help book is just an advisory speech. It's someone who's always trying to advise you what to do with your life. And the main question you should be asking yourself, I ask myself, is why should I believe this person? What credentials do they have that I should believe them? If it's just some other online coach and speaker writing a self-help book, there's no credibility behind that. There's none whatsoever that I should listen to them. Just putting yourself into the mindset of thinking that a person you are reading from knows more about what you should do with your life than you is already ludicrous. So they better have a good reason to give you this advice, and they also should have a good credential to back up their advice for me to believe them, right? And so buy books. If I had to give you an advice, start with the classics and then work your way up from there, because the classics, the classics are the classics for a reason. They have survived for a long time for a reason, because the people who've written them are incredibly wise, incredibly insightful and thoughtful. And so you might want to start believing them first, and then slowly work your way up towards who you want to disregard and who you still want to implement some advice from. So yeah, and that's it. That's the opinion on the self-help culture, because as harmful and as damaging it is, it can certainly also be incredibly helpful for many people. And of course, there's this other buzz phrase that doesn't come from the author or the ones who sell them, but the ones who then resell them. For example, the ones who post them on their Instagram. So this book changed my life. It's also an incredible, hyperbole, superlative, what do you call it? Overestimation of a book. The book doesn't change a life. the books don't change my life. How I deal with the information that's in the books, how I implement the information, that changed my life. So I think the only thing that books do in this case is they give you the opportunity to open up your mind to new ideas which you want to implement into your own life. And that's then just an opportunity. In the end, it's all lies in my hand what I want to do with all the knowledge of all the self-help books I'm talking about, you know. So yeah, I think this is also this podcast about self-help is also the replacement for my podcast, my scrap video on Dale Carnegie's self-help book, one that I could recommend you warmly, because he was the pioneer of this genre in 1936. If you want to start reading a self-help book, it's not a classic, read his book. That's what I would advise you to do. Nonetheless, though, it remains important to think critically. That's probably the most important part I would advise. Don't trust hyperboles. Like, this is hyperboles, just to explain it for you. It's, you know, so many people, this is already in hyperbole, so many people, the best, the worst, the biggest, this is my best experience, the best book I've ever seen. It's likely not. It's likely just a marketing phrase. If, for example, however, a book has a phrase written like, let me look if I can find a proper phrase from it. Let's say here. Nope, this doesn't have it. Perhaps it's this one that has one good. Yes, for example, this. Of course, this is another self-help book by Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. It's also something that's inspired James Clear's Atomic Habits. And here it has a comment on the top of the book. Absolutely fascinating. So, then on the back one, there's another few comments from Jim Collins. Powerful in its elegant and simplicity, sharp, provocative, and useful. Then The Economist. Just the right balance of intellectual seriousness and practical advice on how to break our bad habits. So, of course, it's a book about habits. So, in my opinion, this is a lot more insightful, a lot more telling, and also a lot more individual and a lot less read from the script than the original is still the best. The only book you need to lead you to success. That's from How to Influence and Influence People. Simply because it seems so weird that this is the best. Being the best at something, being the most at something, being the number one at something is so unlikely, and it's so difficult, and it's so hard to achieve that I wouldn't necessarily throw it out there just for one single book, because the best is the best in individual circumstances, and then it's the worst in other circumstances. So trust the descriptions, trust the comments of people, and trust the people who are writing these comments if they're a little bit more formulated, more refinedly formulated. For example, a book that I was actually not really, and also maybe a last point that I want to bring. Of course, you see, I always skip from point to point to point because I don't have a script, because Understand the World Podcast's number one goal is to further develop my idea and develop my way of how to act and speak properly. So the one that I was incredibly disappointed about are self-help books that are written by politicians and political commentators, because they tend to be very politicized. And Jordan Peterson kind of still gets the right role, even though he's very critical of the radical left, but he's also critical of the new right. So, but in his book, he mentions multiple times the problems of the left-wing extremism and the radical left and Marxism, of course, since it's one of his flagship criticisms. But then again, if you have, for example, people like, I don't know, Dave Rubin, who just reviewed his book, Don't Burn This Book. When you read this, it doesn't really say anything new, except that it reinforces its political message, is that people are going crazy, politics are crazy. And for someone who's really, really sick of hearing about politics and doesn't want to hear about politics anymore because it just annoys me to the core, that everyone is all of a sudden a political expert on every single thing, I don't want to hear this. If I want a self-help book, well, that also remains to be individual, harnessing your individual will. David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me, which is a bestseller too, a New York Times bestseller. For some reason, I really want to look into this term, New York Times bestseller, because it seems like every single book is a New York Times bestseller. So therefore, this lens of credibility can't also be that important. I didn't like his book. I didn't like Goggins' book because it just retold all the stories he had told on one podcast of Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu. And so I thought to myself, well, that's not really worth reading. It's not really telling me anything new, and it's absolutely not backed up by any scientific studies or something. And you might argue, well, should it be backed up by scientific studies, Yannick? Isn't motivational psychology way too complicated to put it into the perspective of studies? And I might say, well, May, you're right. You're entitled to your own opinion. Maybe if this book helps you, it helps you. But not every book has to help you in the same way. I don't like books that are not backed up by claims, that are not backed up by credible stories and aren't linked in a little more complex manner than just saying, you can do it, you have to suffer. You know, it's maybe for me this was the beginning of my self-help journey, but now it is a lot more refined. It has to be a lot more, rehearsed. And since I'm someone who's consumed a lot of self-help books for the sake of my thesis, bachelor's thesis, and also master's thesis, and that for that matter, I get a lot more picky, because in the end these books often all say the same, just in a different way. So don't buy 50 self-help books expecting to be told the same way. And then probably the last point before I finish this off is that many of the self-help books, they do disregard history and historical facts and historical events. Number one example for this is the philosophical movement, philosophical stream of Stoicism. Nowadays, many people have posted Instagram quotes, they have accounts dedicated to it on Stoic philosophy, while 99% of them, I would say, maybe a bit less, derive completely from what the Stoic philosophy is. To give you a quick recap, Stoic philosophy has as its prime goal achieving a sense of harmony and being as compared to Epicureanism, which has as its prime goal pleasure. Stoicism tries to rid itself of all the pleasures of the world, to be serene and in tranquility, in a serene state, and live in tranquility. So it has, of course, ties to Buddhism, you can say. But for example, many people say that they want to live a Stoic life by living alone. But that's not the case. You don't live a Stoic life by living alone. If we look traditionally, every single Stoic philosopher, the three big ones, unfortunately, who's always been named is Marcus Aurelius, then there's Seneca, and then there is Marcus Tullius Cicero. Three famous Stoics from ancient Rome. Seneca, of course, being the teacher and the advisor of later Nero, who supposedly burned down Rome, but it didn't happen. They were all people who had incredibly important positions in the public life. Cicero was fundamentally like an outstanding statesman, an orator, philosopher, but also lawyer. Marcus Aurelius, of course, an emperor, and Seneca, a philosopher of the public. He was always on Nero's side. So saying that if you want to live a Stoic life, you want to live a life of privacy and calm, that's just completely wrong. And that's why many books of these, of course, then first of all gets the Daily Stoic is one of them, gets it wrong in a way that is almost reprehensible when you want to think about that these people make this their prime marketing aim to sell a philosophy. But philosophy is, if you take Diogenes and cynicism away, it's almost always a stream of the public life, of getting and being in public, of interacting in public. And since Socrates, it's a life of discussion, it's a life of interaction with other people. And self-help is, since, of course, it's mostly aimed at yourself, but don't get it confused with philosophy, because in many ways, philosophy is dedicated to living in public. How to interact with other people, how to get by with other people, and how to harness better relationships with other people, because it's the love for wisdom, it's the love for discussion, and it's also in the love for discovering new ideas. So yeah, that's maybe the last point. And I think that's why I'm going to wrap this up. We're almost 30 minutes into the podcast now. I don't want to make this too long because I'm still trying to work out a proper scheme, a proper structure, a proper system. But I always get new ideas when I just talk around for 30 minutes about anything that's going on in my head. Next podcast is going to be about how I cleaned my room for the past 2 weeks every single day. Last 2 weeks have been mostly me delivering pizza in the evening because I just need something to do. I'm a little bored, writing my paper in the morning, and then for 6 hours just trying to figure out how to clean and restructure my room. And the coolest part about this is I got a new proper desk, which is much larger than my current one. And the space where you interact the most with is the one I think that you want to make the most beautiful. If you're, for example, a chef, you want to make your kitchen the most beautiful place. But since I'm on my desk a lot, working on my desk a lot, also since I'm in home office for another job, and I write my papers, I want to be more content with them sitting at my desk. And right now, this is a pretty good arrangement to have, because I also don't have access to my phone. My phone is set below my desk. I can't see it, so I'm not prone to grab it and look at it all the time. So yeah, that's it. Today, I hope you liked the new podcast with the new microphone. I really, really hope that once I press stop now, the microphone audio isn't so shabby and bad. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And like I said, if you want to share this episode with someone, that would mean the world to me. The best way to support it is share it with a friend who you think might need it. You can also visit me on Instagram at @IamYannick if you want to do that. Leave me a comment. Leave me your thoughts, and maybe even a follow. Message me, tell me how you found the episode, tell me what you've liked, and also tell me what you didn't like, so I can sort of see how I want to restructure the show in the future. Yeah, this has been the 43rd attempt of attempting to speak and act properly. Thank you for listening. Thank you, I'm signing off, and I'll talk to you all in the next episode. Bye-bye.